Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question comes to us straight out of the Judge Vault. Amy controls a Sphere of Resistance, and she has Ancestral Vision in her hand. Since Sphere makes this card cost one more, is it possible to cast it? Alright, so as I mentioned before, this is a pretty common question that judges get. To understand the answer, we'll need to know why you can't just cast this spell from your hand normally. For this, it's important to understand the difference between mana cost and mana value. A spell's mana cost is the cost represented by the symbols in the top right corner. So this Grizzly Bears has a mana cost of 1 generic mana and 1 green mana. The Sphere of Resistance has a mana cost of 2 generic mana. Mana value is a way to convert this cost into a number that represents how much mana the spell costs, regardless of color. So both of these spells would have a mana value of 2. Bring back the Ancestral Vision, we can see that it does not have any symbols where its mana cost goes. It has no mana cost, and therefore its mana value is 0 by definition. Now, the problem isn't that this spell's mana value is 0. After all, you can cast spells like Ornithopter from your hand just fine. You can even cast stuff like this Engineered Explosives, even if you're choosing for X to be 0. The reason you can't normally cast an Ancestral Vision without jumping through some hoops is because it has no mana cost. This is how Magic represents an unpayable cost. In other words, a cost that cannot be paid. So here's the thing. If you take an unpayable cost and you add 1 mana to it, that doesn't make it a payable cost. It's possible to pay the 1 mana, but it is not possible to pay the thing that the 1 mana got added onto. If you have a background in computer science, you probably saw this one coming. 1 plus 0 is not the same thing as 1 plus null. If you try to evaluate that latter expression, you'll get an error. For that reason, having a cost increase imposed on the Ancestral Vision is not sufficient to allow you to cast it. So, if that's the case, let's take a look at some of the ways that you can play Ancestral Vision. They all boil down to the same basic idea. You have to pay an alternative cost rather than the mana cost. To continue the analogy from earlier, when the game calls the function to evaluate the cost to cast Ancestral Vision, it doesn't get an error because it does not even attempt to read the mana cost off the spell. Thus, it doesn't matter that Ancestral Vision doesn't have one. Now, all the methods of doing this that have historically had the most gameplay significance have been without paying its mana cost, which counts as an alternative cost. Suspend, Cascade, and things like this Omniscience all fall under this category. But there's no reason that we have to use this specific alternative cost. Consider Dream Halls, a card many used as a proto-Omniscience before that card was printed. Since Ancestral Vision's color indicator makes it blue in every game zone, it would be possible to use Dream Halls to cast Ancestral Vision by discarding another blue card. Bear in mind that alternative costs take the place of the mana cost, but additional costs and cost reducers can still apply to whatever cost that you're using. For example, Fist of Suns lets you cast spells for Wooburg rather than their mana costs. If you were going to cast Ancestral Vision this way, with a Sphere of Resistance out, you would end up paying 6 mana in total, 1 of each color plus the 1 generic mana that Sphere added onto this cost. Another thing to keep in mind is that alternative costs do not affect a spell's mana value at all. The same thing is true of additional costs and cost reductions. That means even though you spent 6 mana casting that Ancestral Vision, it could still be countered by a minor misstep because its mana value is still 0. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.